Hello today. Welcome to the Get Real Studio, one of our newest spaces that our design team has created on the Spatial Metaverse platform. We're excited to be here today talking about some emerging tech trends that we see in immersive technology in the metaverse. And we're joined by some really exciting guests that we think are going to help kick off the Get Real Studio space and show kind of what we envision for its use to be able to have some of these discussions and forums on exciting things in our business. So I'm joined today by my co-founder, Rob Merriles from Get Real, John Miller from Launchbox, and Ian Burgett from Launchbox as well. And we've got a really interesting talk scheduled for today. And maybe we can start by just starting with Ian to my left here with some introductions. And Ian and John, tell us a little bit about yourselves, your role, and what Launchbox does.
Thank you so much. So, hey everyone, I'm Ian Burgett, the CTO of Launchbox. Launchbox is a production studio. We do a lot of creative work and we do a lot of technical work, which ultimately ends up being animations, virtual reality projects, augmented reality projects, and recently a lot of integrations of AI technology into any of those things, even the animations, funnily enough. I'll pass it on over to John.
Hey, thanks everyone for having me here. I'm John Miller. Really awesome space here in the Get Real Studios. As Ian was said, we are Launchbox. I am the Chief Creative Officer, and basically what we like to do is take things that our clients have via solutions of VR or AI, mix them together and get a content that can be launched at a trade show or online.
Great. And Rob, we'll end with you. Just introduction, maybe tell a little bit about Get Real and what we're doing in our business.
Sure. Thanks, guys, for being here with us today. I'm Rob Merriles. Ed, you and I started Get Real back almost 3 years ago now, and we've been helping clients get into the metaverse in a variety of different ways over the past few years, and we've been working with some generative AI and other AI technologies these last 2-3 years as well. So it's an exciting time as we see these things converge, and I'm excited for the conversation today.
So maybe John, I'll start with you. We heard both. I heard both of you mention, both from the Get Real side and the Launchbox side, mention generative AI and kind of this confluence of technologies we're seeing between AR and VR and perhaps metaverse. Maybe John, you could start by just talking about, there's been so much in the news and in the headlines of recent times. What are a couple of things just recently that you identify that you think are important or kind of like stand out to you as major headlines as AI has kind of swept everyone's imagination here?
Sure, yeah. I mean, right off the bat, it's basically in the public sector. You know, pretty much since April of last year, it was very much behind the curtains for a lot of the beta users. And that you could see in generative AI for visuals and some of the chat as well. But now what we're seeing is integration on a public domain. And I don't know if you're familiar with Google just tried showing their AI and it answered the question incorrectly. And they lost $100 billion for that. And it's entering this really, I would say, unique space because they're trying to bring it to the average user. You know, Microsoft did it with their Bing integration, and that had mixed results. We saw the AI was answering questions correctly, and it was doing well. And then on the other side, it was legitimately threatening people. Threatening to dox people and using their personal information against them. So that's been a very interesting, very public trial and error process as far as the AI industry goes.
Ian, maybe I'll turn to you. Other, recent developments that you think are kind of frame where the technology is today and where it might be going forward that people probably heard of, but maybe deserve a little bit more highlight from your perspective.
Certainly. There's a lot of different AI out there, but the one that's most near and dear to my heart is definitely the text completion or text generation algorithms that are being put together with AI. In particular, the trend for automatically predicting what you want to write in code is going to be very interesting to see how that changes the software development industry over the next few years. It was impressive just to see AI complete a sentence, complete a few sentences, but as people start to use it as a tool for software engineering or even no-code software development, I think that's going to open up programming and creation of a lot of programs, virtual reality included, to many more people than it's had in the past.
Agreed. In fact, just to jump on that a bit, there was a recent, there's this program called Runway. They just released what was called their Gen 1. And it basically allows you to take animation and add a continuity that wasn't there before. So you could have an entire animated sequence that would look relatively similar from the beginning to the end, which we haven't really seen. So it's phenomenally growing at an exponential rate.
Thanks, John. We'll come back to this a little bit of some more of the applications and along the same themes of this runway discussion in a second. But I want to give Rob a chance to weigh in too. Rob, current state of affair in the busy world of generative AI, kind of what do you see out there as some of the milestones that have happened recently?
Well, it's really fascinating to watch this conversation unfold so readily on the public stage, right? Where now everybody's product went from alpha to beta immediately, if only for the fact that the ChatGPT launched when it did. But people are, John pointed out, like Bing had a tough start there, right? It got some really positive feedback. Bing is based off of part of the OpenAI architecture with ChatGPT, and all of a sudden it started expressing that it wanted to be human, and now Microsoft has curtailed that significantly. You can't have ongoing several-hour conversations with Bing anymore. You can ask 6 questions and then you have to start a new thread. But to your question, I think that a lot of the focus has been on the ability for ChatGPT to generate text, but I think it's kind of doing another thing, more subtly, which is it's upping the public's expectation of how do we ask questions. So we've kind of very naturally moved to a natural language processing mindset of I want to ask questions, as I would speak a question to an expert, and that's different than a Google search, right? And so I think that as much as it's changing the outputs of what it can generate, it's also going to radically change the way we think about the input. How do we ask a question? How do we find out information? How do we merge the information in the data in the world's data sets? We're not quite ready. ChatGPT and others aren't quite ready to integrate all that data, but we're off to a pretty quick start, and that's got some peril, as we've been talking about.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of those perils and maybe in a little bit towards the end, but certainly there's been some high profile mistakes along the way, alongside all the promise really that the technology has generated. I want to kind of get to some new trends and talk, specifically start with both John and Ian around some of the work that LaunchVox is doing to leverage AI in their business and where they have seen some very practical, time, ability to leverage the tools in interesting ways. Either John or Ian, I'll open it up to you, but just this idea around combining AI with avatars and the science behind avatars, and the way that's kind of that you see that as being really something that could be leveraged by businesses. Would be interesting to get your thoughts on that. I know you've got some interesting work on that front.
Certainly.
Yeah,
I'll start and then pass it over to John right after. So where we see potential use for this, and it's not revolutionary in the sense that we know a lot of other people are thinking along the same lines, but we want to take the AI speech as text and put it on an avatar so that you can speak with a virtual character and get natural responses without as much curation from some third person. An example of that would be we want to do kind of a soft skills trainer where we're going to have a role-playing bot pretend to be a doctor, and then you can speak with that doctor for, in our case, selling products. You can say, hey, doctor, I'm a salesperson for this medical device company. Would you like to know about our product? And then we can pre-script the AI to respond smoothly, but still be focused on playing that role, being that doctor, asking questions to the salesperson, and taking up, ideally, a portion of the training that is very hard to do in person. Role-playing in general is not easy for people to do, especially in a corporate setting. So to take away one of those people and just focus on speaking with a bot, we're thinking might actually help in that training process. And in some ways in certification as well, because not only can we get a transcript of that speech, we can then run it through the AI to get intent or check for how closely they followed their script, or whether or not they hit all the bullet points they needed to hit in their piece. So again, not something new. A lot of people are doing AI right now with avatars, but when you narrow it down to a specific domain like we're doing, we're expecting to see a lot of interest and a practical way to use that AI that's not just ask us any question about anything at any time. John, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I see it in a lot of personal spaces as well. You know, if you were to integrate it, think about Alexa, right? And if it was a little bit, let's say, a little bit better at trying to ascertain what you're trying to do at home. One of the things I was thinking of recently was if there was a way to scan, you know, ingredients that you might have in your cabinets or in your fridge, you could ask your, you know, chat assistant, you know, questions like, hey, what can I make in 10 minutes with the ingredients I have, you know, but leave chicken out, or, you know, some other kind of negative weight, or, you know, on the other end, using it to help you come up with block ideas for Legos. You know, these are simple ways that you could integrate an assistant in your home life to kind of, you know, add a quality there.
And we're thinking that
Ian,
could be, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask Ian a quick question. How many years? So you just described a conversation between doctor and a sales, you know, a med tech, you know, rep or whatever, sales rep. So that's a healthcare sales conversation. How long do you feel we are away from an actual healthcare conversation where the doctor doesn't have a sales rep on the other side of that, but actually an AI doctor, but actually has a patient on the other side of that conversation?
So,
Sorry, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say there's a couple answers to that. I would say on paper, we're probably really close. Probably, I would say within a year, we'd be at a level you could have that. But regulatory wise, probably much longer. And I think a lot of that is like, how do we make sure that, you know, there's not false information fed to a patient on a level that someone is liable for. And there's also HIPAA compliance. There's all sorts of red flags for that to ever be implemented correctly. So I could see that being at least 5 years or more. But as far as the capabilities of doing so, because all of this can be, you know, fed into a model within a bot, I would say we're really close. Probably within a year, you would be able to actually have a diagnosable procedural case where you could have a patient come in following methodical practices that have been established before and get good healthcare from it. Ian,
kind of like the I was going to, let me just jump in real quick, John, on your point. It's kind of like the automated driving discussion in a way, right? It just applied in a different setting. The outlier case, whether it's the, you know, individual that gets hit in an automated, even though 999,999 people are safe, it's that one person that gets hit. It's that one piece of misinformation that comes from a doctor in an AI, generative AI world. Even though the rest might be getting phenomenal feedback, that's probably going to drive the regulatory conversation, right?
Yeah.
That's correct. And there's one note on the AI, how it interprets requests and processes answers that's important to consider there, which is that by default, any model is going to give you an answer, no matter the question. So you could ask, what do I do with this rash on my insert body part here that doesn't exist? And it's going to give you a convincing answer by default because it's trained to give an answer to anything. For a medical doctor to handle that as an AI, though, it would need to have filters to say, well, the question is not accurate, or there's been something injected that's false into the request. So I need to respond not with a certain answer, but with something like, well, let's clarify, that doesn't sound like that was what you were trying to say. And that's a portion that I think you see with things like the Bing search or like the Google snafu. It's if you're getting an answer that's wrong, it's probably better to not give any answer or ask for clarification, which is not the default behavior of any of these models.
Yeah. Just to add in something that I'm more curious about rather than having an answer to is on the other end, how does AI increase our success and mortality rates in medical? If you think about, well, whatever we give a bot now is just trained data sets, right? They're using what has already been defined through practices. But at what point does that help elevate us into, machine learning providing better medical answers than what we're currently capable of getting? That's what I get really curious about.
Like the ability to just consume a tremendous amount of large data sets is what you're saying, right? To be able to discern stuff that people haven't been able to.
Yes, exactly.
One of the things so just to kind of put a finer point on this, I know we've got kind of a demonstration here in a moment. We're going to step out of the studio and show a little bit of some of the adaptation of where we think the technology can go, thanks to some of the work that John and Ian have done. Is this whole idea of like the VR or the immersive experience with the avatar, whether it be metahumans, whether it be some other very lifelike avatar, arming it with ChatGPT enabled functionality to really create these immersive experiences where people can you can simulate the role playing, the advice giving, and do it in an immersive way that totally changes the way that the content is received. Like the business, the medical, the marketing, applications of a tool like that, we're already getting asked today. Here we are just in the early months of it, of like, where is the VR chatbot enabled by the ChatGPT, and why is it not universal in any platform? So, it'd be interesting to see. Like, I know we got some examples of what that might look like, and so perhaps we can bring them on, and we'll see what we have to show the audience. So, John, we moved out here into the balcony for a little bit of a demo of something that you and Ian put together, and just we talked previously around this kind of intersection between avatars and generative AI enabled bots, and how that might change customer experiences or management experiences or patient doctor experiences going forward. We kind of thought we'd try to put one into spatial here today, and give a little bit of an example to the audience and see how it might work in the future, and how it can leverage some of the current technology available to us today. Before we start, John, can you just give us a little rundown, a little clue as to what we're going to be witnessing here, and maybe a few caveats as to where we've taken some license for the demo purpose to show off to the audience?
Yeah, so this is our chatbot. He has been trained with all sorts of data sets that we have grabbed from the general wide web, and we have implemented that with ChatGPT as an architecture underneath him. Call it his spine, if you will. And what makes him unique is that we were able to do pretty much all of this through Unreal using metahumans, although we're not seeing the metahuman version here with the spatial / Ready Player Me, but we do have a version of that. And what we wanted to do is have a chatbot that can role play and take responses that we are giving it based off of certain criteria. Like in this scenario, you're going to be a sales role play bot, and I'm going to try and pitch you something, and I can give you negative weights as far as say like, no matter what, I do not want you to let me close this deal, or only accept this proposal if I do this in criteria. So we wanted to really focus on that. So what we have here is a little vignette of that we were going to run through. I was going to ask you some questions. I thought you could as well, and we could see, how that goes.
Awesome. And I've seen this example on the MetaHuman side. It's quite unique of what you can do with that in kind of a custom setting. Certainly, we're not far away from using kind of native avatar platforms like Ready Player Me or Spatial, or from other platforms to help put this technology in too. So I'm glad we're able to do it today with our friend Jimmy. And why don't we just get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to ask Jimmy some questions. All right. Hello. How are you doing today?
I am well. How are you today?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for asking. May I ask who we are speaking to?
I am a virtual human powered by OpenAI, the same technology responsible for ChatGPT.
Oh, that's great. Can you pretend to be a software engineer?
Yes, I have general knowledge on many topics. If I don't have specific domain knowledge, you can provide fine-tuning information so that I can provide better responses.
Okay, let's give that a shot. My name is John. What's your name?
Hello, I'm Jimmy. I am a software engineer.
What kind of software do you make, Jimmy?
I write machine learning and AI programs.
That's great. Is that difficult to do, Jimmy?
Yes, it can be very difficult. There's an art to the process, and any changes to the underlying system can take a long time to train. But once the systems are set up, they can be quite impressive.
Yeah, I would agree. Very impressive. Thank you. Well, that's all for today, so you can just shut down.
You're welcome. Goodbye.
And that's Jimmy.
So, yeah, that's Jimmy. So, John, obviously, that's a very basic interaction that we've put here, and we've put into Spatial here, leveraging just their native avatar and such. But pretty remarkable just to be part of that conversation. It probably shows through a little bit to the audience too around some of the capabilities where we're starting to be able to have intelligent, fact-based conversations with the bot. I think about these always-on marketing experiences, or people want to have a 3D emporium for a product launch, and the ability to have characters that are able to answer questions around a product, staffed really literally around the clock to answer questions for our audience, and then combine that with some sort of e-commerce experience. Really speaks to that confluence of technologies that we were talking about earlier, and just kind of being in here in this very brief conversation with Jimmy in Spatial, super excited to where these integrations are going to go to. And I don't think it's going to be very long before we're going to see this across many, many different immersive platforms.
Agreed. And the thing that really excites me, especially with what we've developed here, is in that you have a chatbot that you can talk to using a data model set that we've given. Really, for me, is the fact that there's continuity in the entire conversation, so that from the moment that you're done talking to the bot on the phone, you can then follow up in an email to that same bot, and they will have continuity of that conversation, and then they will respond to what you were saying in that email. So this can be an actual training application that goes through entire stages of training to closing out a job, because you don't just close after one conversation with the client, unless you're really lucky, or unless you're selling, more of the minor products like trophies or products that can be sold. Whereas something that would take time overall with teams of people, you can train a bot to go through that entire process over weeks with check-ins, multiple phone calls, and that entire conversation will continue. So that's what gets me really excited.
Yeah, I think too, we touched on it earlier around the role playing aspects. The commercial and the service aspects there too, but just the difficulty and the expense and the time required in replicating role playing environments and training situations or in interview situations, the ability to kind of come into an immersive space and interact with a bot that might be trained in a particular subject matter or field really can, I mean, the extension of that are nearly limitless. And to see it, nearly here is really exciting. And I can't wait to see what both businesses and other professionals do to kind of replicate that experience and to give people that outlet. The amount of times you can practice those conversations versus traditional methods is astounding in terms of preparation.
Agreed.
Well, let's go back into the studio here and we'll wrap up with Rob and Ian. Thanks a lot, Jimmy. Well, great. Thanks for putting that demo together, John and Ian. Certainly kind of gives us a little bit of a flavor of what an AI-powered bot might look like in virtual reality. And, I know we are only short months away from that being a reality and something that we're all really interested in seeing. I want to pivot away from just that particular application. I know that your business is quite diverse and you guys are seeing a lot of other applications for generative AI. And so, John, aside from the bots, like you're seeing it come up in a couple different areas of your work that I think are really interesting that I think the audience would benefit from. So care to share a little bit more on what you guys are doing?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Ed. So from the beginning of AI launching, like what really got me excited was how it can augment the creative pipeline. So back in, I would say May, we all got early betas to both Midjourney, which is an image generative software, and then also DALL-E 2, which is OpenAI's version of the same. And what we had always seen in our pipeline of doing any of the animations or work that we had done, the concept and storyboard phase was always a mashup of going on Google, finding, examples of what you want to do, making mood boards, throwing that together in some kind of mosaic, then putting that all in a storyboard. And that process can take weeks, depending on like how big the project is and what we're really doing. But what we saw with image generation, and this isn't to curtail anyone's job or anything like that, but what we were seeing was there were efficiencies that were incredible. Like being able to tell a computer what you were visualizing or to give it examples of some kind of nebulous idea and being able to then throw that into a mosaic without you needing the skills. Like I'm a terrible traditional artist, but using a computer to help me get the same ideas that I have in my head that would take, a couple days through Photoshop, I was able to cut that down to a matter of a few days, over a week's time to a matter of a few days. And what that allows really an artist to do is to be more creative because they don't have to focus on the logistics. They can just focus on the output. So for me, like just on the storyboard and prototyping side was incredible. And it's continuing to get better. So that just on that side. And then we're seeing in creative writing, like ChatGPT, you can literally give it a script and you can say, hey, this is currently formalized for an audience of, let's say, surgeons, but we want to make it more patient facing. Well, ChatGPT can rewrite that, like that entire script, give it back to you, and then you can go and edit to what you want the flavor to be without having to rewrite everything. You now have a foundation that would have, again, taken you a few days just to process, like how am I going to get through this, doing all your research, but here it is. And you could really curtail like what you want that, audience to be. Is it 5-year-olds? Is it adults with autism? Like ChatGPT is really good at filtering that. So we were seeing that, which was incredible. And then now we're also seeing it for training in combination with metahumans, which we had just saw in the chatbot. So on the AI side of creativity, it's exciting. We're seeing it now in 3D. We're seeing it in animation, and that is just hitting the market. But for the most part, I would say on the prototyping and storyboard phase, absolutely a necessity for growing pipelines, especially for small studios.
kind of certainly plays on Rob's earlier comment, John, around, the outputs are amazing, right? But it like really on this, when you talk about the creative process, it really aids on the inputs and some of these building blocks, the early stages, the drafting, to kind of cut timelines down and make that process more efficient. Probably not something that people think right away, but certainly where some of the great applications and use cases are just helping creators elevate and streamline how they produce their finished product, whether it be written or language or visual, whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
Rob, you've been involved in some of the efforts at Get Real as we've kind of experimented and developed some use cases around AI. I would love to give you just the final word here in a few quick moments to just to tell the audience kind of where we see it. I mean, obviously we come from a little different angle from a consulting standpoint, but certainly we have client requests coming in all the time, and we're leveraging some generative AI use cases to help us excel as well as we kind of service those clients.
Yeah, and to your point around kind of the formative stages of contemplation of a problem, I think we've had good success in just trying to we haven't really talked about it here yet today, but the idea of teaching ChatGPT about ourselves first, what our capabilities are, how we approach problems, and then applying that knowledge in new circumstances of, say, a new client problem or a situation that we're talking about how to solve, and just seeking ideas given its knowledge, so to speak, of who we are, what we are, and what we perceive that we're good at. And that's been a good way for us to, I think about writer's block, right? It's people have blocks all the time. So ChatGPT can be a good way to be a catalyst to try to unblock yourself. We're using it in other ways too. We're using it sometimes to modify our marketing scripts, or try to think about what an approach might be with a client that we haven't yet spoken with, and we'll try to teach it about the client, and then with the knowledge about Get Real. We've dabbled a little bit in some of the storyboarding piece. I can't wait until ChatGPT can generate a three-dimensional, in an effective way, a three-dimensional object. It can do that some now, making that process streamlined. We're doing what's called name entity recognition off of bodies of text to try to, hey, what is this about? What is it about this company or this person or this topic? So there's just a lot of different ways that I think we've started to, some deeper than others, that we've started to leverage it.
Rob,
Yeah, I see. Go ahead, Chad.
I was just curious if you could elaborate a little bit more on that last point, because that actually piques my curiosity.
Which one, John?
For the generation of, it sounds like, positions or roles of companies.
So like what one of our folks hypothesized the scenario where we were, I think, pitching to Nike, and so ChatGPT knows all about Nike already, all from whatever data it was trained on. And so that was, I think, our initial effort to train it about ourselves, and then say, okay, now how would we approach Nike with a Get Real, proposal? And so that's kind of what unleashed kind of that area of creativity for us. Of, oh, you know what, we can actually teach it quite a bit about ourselves and what our strengths are, what we perceive our weaknesses to be, and then match that against any client. And in one case, I remember it didn't know much about the client. It's a relatively large client, but there's just not a lot of stuff out on there, out on them, on whatever they're on the web or whatever the sources were that it was trained on. And so we had to teach it about both the client and ourselves. So it was a little bit more, kind of wasn't the first mile, it was a little bit farther down the road. But it still was able to try to say, kind of, I mean, some things that it was identifying were pretty self-evident, But there were some others that actually prompted conversation for us of, hey, you know what, that is a reasonable way for us to try to tackle. And sometimes you can integrate like a different role, like put a different role, different person that you're speaking with, adopt a different persona. Asking ChatGPT to adopt the persona, how would they react to this particular marketing pitch, knowing what it knows. So
that's a great idea.
It's
fun, right? To learn in that way.
So here we are, just 3-4 short months into so this public kind of awareness around these tools. I would love, I know we're out of time here today, and we just really scratched the surface here today with John and Ian, but we'd love to have a chance to have you guys come back here in a couple months and talk about how some of these use cases or other use cases have evolved. Certainly, we know that the public debate around it will continue to evolve. Functionality will continue to increase. So I want to thank everybody again, John and Ian, for putting together the demo and for sharing your knowledge and for doing all the great work that you're doing at LaunchVox. It's really exciting to see all the projects that you guys continue to work on. Rob, thank you again for offering your opinions and your feedback on what Get Real's doing. Thank you, everybody, for in the audience for coming in the Get Real studio today. And if you're interested in hearing more about what either of us are doing, we'll drop a note into the comment below, and you can reach out and contact us. So, John, Ian, thanks a lot, and we will talk again soon.